So look at that sharp spike it's given us so that you can see the series of 1, 2, 3 drop, 1, 2, 3 drop, 1, 2, 3. Really, we would probably do this every other day, so it would look a little bit different than that. But it looks
Again,
like, yeah.
It's lower, but again, what you do see, so the thing you want to really notice about this is there isn't really this build up to a total plasma level.
Yeah.
You are very much at peak levels very, very quickly. The peaking point is quite accurate. You see, you don't get this massive layering with a slow ester. Sorry, with a fast ester. So it's really good if you want to get peak levels high, quick.
Real quick. Like week 1, dude.
But yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit more than that. But at the same time, you're not going to get this continuous build.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the podcast with Dave Crosland. I'm Scott McNally, and all of our programming is brought to you by you, the people of Patreon. Thank you guys for your support. We are also brought to you by Strom Sports Nutrition. For those of you in the UK, you can get great health stacks over there, especially if you're on cycle. They also have some performance supplements. Somebody asked me last night on DM on Instagram, hey, what's your code for Strom? And as far as I know, they don't do codes at Strom. He just offers the best prices that he can. And they support what we're doing. They love the show, so they wanted to be part of it. So they advertise with us. So check them out. You know, we're of like minds. We're also brought to you by evalbloodanalysis.com. If you're in the UK and you're on gear, then you should get your labs done. And you can get your labs done with Dave at evalbloodanalysis.com. We're also brought to you by, of course, TrueNutrition.com. Use our code THINK over there, especially for you guys in the US. They've got literally every supplement under the sun, basically wholesale prices, every flavor you can think of for their proteins. And they're the first company that ever worked with this channel. So thank you guys very much at True Nutrition. Last but not least, supplementsource.ca for our Canadians, guys. They have great deals that change week to week on closeout products, label changes, stuff like that, plus all your normal supplements too. Dave, what's up, man?
I'm good.
Dave's got a dog. He's got a new bulldog, old new bulldog. So Dave acts like, and by the way, guys, we're going to get into some stuff about steroid esters today and half-lives, and we're going to chart them all out. But before that,
bulldogs are much more important.
Dave's got a new dog, a new old dog. Can you get him up there for us, or will he want to stay?
Come here, Pudding.
Pudding?
What? Yeah, Pudding.
Is that his name?
It is now. Come here, Puds. Come here. Come on. I can't lift you up from down there.
Dave's about to get bit by a dog on the show.
Come here, Pudding. Oh, you big fat humper.
Oh! He's beautiful. Hi, buddy. Hi, buddy. Good boy. Can you speak?
No bad.
Oof. Oof.
Yeah, I can speak. Scots are no good.
Oh my God, dude. What does that dog weigh? He is definitely, you know how they say like dogs and their owners have similarity? I see the resemblance, Dave.
That's why you said he was gorgeous.
He is a beautiful dog, man. He's cool. And you said he's about 2, huh?
We think he's about 2. I mean, we fostered him, started getting him right. He went to a new owner. They fucked up, basically.
Okay.
And then I went down and pulled him out of there yesterday, and now he's back with us.
People love him in the chat. Dude is humongous. He's a beautiful dog. All right, so here's the thing. We got asked a question last week on the show. What would be better for growing muscle? Fast-acting compounds or long-acting compounds? And, you know, we kind of got into that conversation, and then it got me thinking, man, and I started pulling up. I hadn't looked at them in years, but I remember years ago when I first started running gear, I was, you know, I needed to learn about what esters were. And one of the ways you could do that is like go to these steroid calculators that they have online. I've got one here. It's called steroidplotter.com, where you can type in how much gear, what ester, how often you're going to take it, and then it'll break down a chart of what the buildup of these compounds look like. Can you share with us before we get into it, like what are the caveats of using something like this?
It's very simplified. It's not accurate specifically accurate, but it's okay for a general idea.
Yeah.
I wouldn't take the levels that it shows you as being the levels you're going to achieve. It doesn't take into account individuality, body fat, different rates of metabolism, all that sort of stuff, which would be impossible to do really anyway. So, take that for account as what it is. There's a limitation of what you can do with this. It is a very oversimplified version. It's not super accurate with decay rate or the way it decays, because the initial decay is greater. But it's enough to give you a ballpark sort of comparison if you were wanting to compare. But what I wouldn't do is say, I'm taking 500 mega tests a week, so this is what my blood plasma level is, because I very much doubt that will be accurate.
Okay.
But if you wanted to do a comparison of, like we're going to do, the 500 test nth against the 500 prop, then yeah, it would be reasonably okay for that sort of thing.
All right. So this website is called steroidplotter.com. So I'm looking at what I have to do here. It says plot your protocol, 12 weeks. You don't have to put your name in. Start date is today. Because if you got your gear, I don't care what your plans are, you're most likely 99% chances that you're starting the day your gear arrives. So let's start with, what are we going to do here? How do they have this rated, Dave? What does this look like? Should I say every 3.5 days we're taking, 250 tests? Does that sound right, or do you want to go higher than that?
Well, if every 3.5 days, 250 would be the equivalent of 500 a week. So, yeah, we're spot on with that.
Okay. Do you want to go with Cypionate, or do you want to go with Enanthate?
We'll go with Nth because it's the more popular, more common.
All right. So we're going to do this from week 1 to week 12. I don't know what offset days means. No. Add an offset 1 or more to shift the compound days later. Never mind. We're not even going to do that. And, all right, let's see. Oh, and I got to move this back to 0. So, okay. So let's plot this out.
So what's the graph on the side? I can't see it. So what's the side panel saying?
What do you mean side panel?
So you've got two measurements on a graph. You've got the axes.
I see.
The XY axis. Yeah, what's the
8K? 8K is. I bet I can zoom this in. How about that? 8K is at the top. And then it goes by, it looks like weeks on the bottom. So
that's an attempt of measuring NGDL at 8. All right, okay.
So it looks like we reach our peak here by around, what is this? 1, 2. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. Around week 5-ish is what it's telling us. Yeah, ballpark. Goes a little higher in week 6. It's actually going higher in week 6. So week 6, it's saying that we have our peak. And then you can see those troughs too, right? Between shots. So this thing is telling us, for instance, that we're up at 7,000 on shot day, it looks like. And then down to 6,000, 5.8 in the trough between shots.
This is what I'm so to put this in context. This is why I was saying about the accuracy of peaks and stuff.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, in most people, 500 milligrams of test is gonna put you somewhere around 100 nmol, give or take.
Okay.
Which is around 4,500.
Okay.
Which is around 4,500 NGDL.
Okay.
This is putting you at 7,000.
So it's maybe a little on the high end.
Yeah. So
all right.
This is where I was saying about using it as a measurement of blood plasma is not very accurate, but using it as a comparative, because you're using the same calculating formula, so using it as a comparative between two compounds, it would be okay with.
Okay. So let's do this. What do you say? Because I want to make sure, if you go to every other day, some weeks you're going to get 3 shots, some weeks you're going to get 4 shots. So if we were to do prop, can we say 3 times per week?
Okay.
And then what's the exact?
What we're looking at, 175-ish?
500 divided by 3 is 166.
Yeah, 166.
So let's say we're using 166 milligrams of testosterone, and now we're going to go to propionate. and this is going to be 3 times a week. Let's plot that. So what was our highest point it's telling us? About
7,000.
7,000, and then the lowest point after it builds up about 6,000 ballpark, you know. So okay, let's see what this says. Boom. So look at that sharp spike it's given us, so that you can see the series of 1, 2, 3 drop, 1, 2, 3 drop, 1, 2, 3. Really, we would probably do this every other day, so it would look a little bit different than that. But it looks
again,
like, yeah,
it's lower. But again, what you do see, so the thing you want to really notice about this is there isn't really this build up to a total plasma level.
Yeah,
you are very much at peak levels very, very quickly. The numbers are complete utter bullshit. But
right.
The peaking point is quite accurate. You see, you don't get this massive layering with a slow ester. Sorry, with a fast ester. So it's really good if you want to get peak levels high, quick.
Real quick. Like week 1, dude.
But yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit more than that. But at the same time, you're not going to get this continuous build. If you want, the downside of this is that because you're reaching peak plasma at such a rapid pace, and notice that we are still significantly below the peak plasma of the nth.
Yeah.
That you're also going to get this sudden influx of sides, or potentially this sudden influx of sides.
Sure.
Because you get this rapid onslaught of increased hormone. So
this is telling us, so through the week, let's not measure that real deep trough where you take the 2 days off, but for comparison's sake, and once again, this isn't perfect or accurate, but it's probably accurate to its version of the Enanthate cycle, right? So the trough is down at 3,000, and then the peak is up at, there we go, closer to 5, 7. So
right, let me. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What is the half-life of test prop?
I mean, on average, they say like 3 days, something like that.
Right.
But everybody's different, right?
Right. So what's the peak point?
What do you mean?
5.7.
Yep, 5.7.
What's the low trough point?
The low trough point, though, is after 2 days off.
I get that.
Okay, 1.6.
Right. So if you've got a half-life of 3 days,
right,
and a peak of 5.7 thousand, in 3 days you'd expect your trough
at a little under 3,
2.8. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is showing in 2 days a trough of 1.7. So this is why I have a big issue with the actual shape of the graphs.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on that 100%.
I did look a long time ago with a guy. Fucking name's gone out of my head, and Aaron Hudson.
I remember Aaron. Aaron's a great guy. I met him in person.
Aaron does software programming, stuff like that. He builds programs and stuff.
Yeah.
And we were looking at trying to get an accurate way of doing this. Yes, I see you. Looking at trying to get an accurate way of doing this, and the maths was so fucking complex.
Really?
Yeah, for that simple reason, because we knew these were inaccurate. We knew these weren't plotting you proper peaks and proper troughs.
Yeah.
But the maths was so complex.
I'm just going to do Anadrol every day for 12 weeks at 100 milligrams. And I just want to see what that does.
So Scott's pushing it on the oxys.
The oxys. So we're... Yeah, look at that peak and trough. That's a one-time administration. And obviously... So, I mean, we do have that layering, right? So imagine what's going to happen now if we have the that test enanthate. That's going to kind of fill up all these gaps. You're still on, a hefty milligram, 24/7. There is no major trough. Put it this way, there was a lot more blue, you know what I mean, with the long-acting compound.
Right. Do you remember how many half-lives it is for a drug to be regarded as spent?
Oh, geez. Well, let's figure if you had 400, 1 half-life is 200, 2 half-lives is 100, 3 half-lives is 50, 4 is 25. So I would have to think it would be somewhere after 4, 3, 4, right?
Right, so Anadrol's half-life at a max is 9.
Okay.
Usually closer to 8. So let's go with 8 because it fits in a day very well. We're 3 half-lives by 24 hours.
What do you mean, though? So 100, 50, 25.
So 100, 50, 25. So 12.5 would be where you would be before you did your next application.
But that's 8, right?
No, it's not. If you're doing 100 milligrams,
yeah,
8 hours. Sorry, 8 hours. Yes,
8 hours.
Working on 8 hours. At 24 hours, you'd be 12.5.
After 3 half-lives, that's 24 hours.
You'd be 12.5. 50, 25, 12.5.
Yeah, okay. 100 to 50 is the first one. Yep, 50 to 25, 12.5. Yep, you're right.
So I think that graph is probably being a bit generous on the troughs.
You're probably right. So back to our conversation we had last week, because we were trying to have that conversation of, and I've seen it myself, and I've heard other people say it. I think the first time I had ever heard it, my late friend Dave Kalick, he's a guy who, old school bodybuilder, kind of like grew up with the Venice Beach crew. His picture's on the wall there now, by the way, which warms my heart. They put his picture up at Gold's. Passed away almost a year ago now, R.I.P. He was the first person who mentioned to me, he's like, man, years and years ago, he's like, if you want to grow as much size as you can in your off season, it's the long esters. That's where the gains are. And I guess I could see you are going to keep your blood levels elevated extensive for the whole time. Yeah, you may reach a similar peak, with a short ester, but you also have a big trough in between,
Yeah, your total anabolic exposure is going to be much greater because it's much more consistent. And it's not going to be these angular peaks that you see on that graph. It's going to be more of a wave motion.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be more of there'll be a steep incline from injection. But even then, you're talking over 12 to 48 hours for a slow-acting ester to
build. Yeah.
So there's all these variables that are considered the graphs are super, but you're going to get a more rapid flat line to peak. But then you're not going to get a point and a drop. It's going to round.
Right.
It's going to be more like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Where you get this defined angle, and then you get this rounded off the top, and then it comes down and off. The graph would look a hell of a lot different if it was accurately plotted. But it does give you a basic idea of how much more drug exposure you get from a slow ester to what you get from a sharp ester. If you calculate the volume that's colored blue in those graphs, the volume in the Enanthate is probably going to be over 30% greater than the volume covered in the fast acting, and that's your exposure to anabolics you're looking at. That's the saturation of anabolics in your system.
Yeah. So, all right. I just thought it would be kind of fun to visually look at that, even though, once again, those graphs are far from perfect, which we kind of illustrated here too. So listen, we've got a bunch of listener questions.
Okay.
What were you going to say?
No, I just said it does support and show that difference between fast actors and long actors from an exposure point of view. So, it's useful in that sense.
Yeah. So we got a bunch of listener questions, guys. Hold on a second. I just got some progress pictures from a friend. It looks good. We'll get back to him later. And if you guys want to take part in the next show, then we'd love to have you along. I just comment in our YouTube comments like everybody else, and we're going to try to blow through all these. So we'll rapid fire them if needed. I did want to start with this one, which I thought was really nice by Brady. He says, natural guy here, but I've been watching you guys forever, and you're by far my favorite bodybuilding podcast. How about that? We got another natty. Do you know how many natties we have that watch this show, Dave?
Dirty. Dirty individuals. Vile creatures.
Oh, I like George. He's a really nice guy. He says, Scott, thank you for managing the podcast in such a great way. That's a good start. I like that.
Oh, you.
He says, and I love your duo.
Creepy man.
I love your duo. He likes us together. Question, there is almost no person who takes test-only cycles. Could you advise why people avoid to continue with test-only cycles? Test seems to be safer, unlike tren or deca, but it is just not efficient. And is it just not efficient enough?
Oh, it's very efficient. It just, people don't like simple solutions to problems, particularly when it comes to this.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you've got a test-only cycle. We've covered this quite a bit, but a test-only cycle, obviously you've got estrogen management issues. You've got potential DHT, and the DHT from test is not the same as DHT from Primo or Mast. It is different. It is going to be more impacting, though it will be at much lower levels. So, there are potential problems, but yeah, if managed correctly, it can be, I would say it's safer. I think that's a difficult word to employ. Because there's so much around dose and other things, and even the harsher drugs, if there's some decent management, can be less impacting on your health than the so-called safer drugs if they're not managed at all. So there's a relativity there. But yeah, people don't like test only, I think, in the most part, because it's just too basic.
Yeah. Cost-wise, when I was younger in bodybuilding, I was strapped for cash. And one of the things that made sense to me was running a really low dose of tren with my cycles, because it's such a strong drug, such a strong compound. If I were to add in, there's so much talk nowadays about total milligram exposure. Like total milligrams equals like a 2-gram cycle is, this harsh. But a 2-gram test cycle versus a 2-gram Primo cycle is a completely different animal, or 2-gram tren cycle, So I feel like you can get a lot out of, and this is kind of a segue, not answering his question, but I found that like a really low dose, even like 25 milligrams of tren every other day, along with my test, had a punch. You know what I'm saying? And cost effective wise, it was a cheap cycle to run.
2-gram tren. Hope the tren.
Yeah. How about this one? Hey guys, love the podcast. Testing EQ is one of my best cycles. It says, oh, okay, this was more of a comment, and I had a thought on it. He said, best cycles I've ever had, but if I've been on it for over 6 months, it's created lots of inflammation in my joints. Couldn't even squat or do front raises. The pain was unbearable. Not to stay over 8 to 10 weeks on test and EQ. Thanks, guys. I just had a comment for him. We train harder on cycle. Like we get really pumped. You know what I'm saying, Dave? We want to get the most out of that cycle. I would just ask him to think about this. Is that inflammation in your joints due to the gear, or was it due to your training? Was it, were you doing more volume? Were you pushing heavier weights? Because those things will definitely cause sore joints and issues, especially if there's something you could have tweaked in your form, or you're just doing too much volume, overuse, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
stuff like that.
I would say inflammation from anabolics in joints is incredibly rare. I don't actually recall knowing anyone suffering from inflammation in joints just from anabolic use.
Yeah, I think it's just that he happened to be on cycle, so he was pushing,
Yeah. Potentially low estrogen, so oversuppression of estrogen could definitely be a factor there.
True. That's a great point.
But yeah, you tend to, most people on cycle do tend to want to push more load.
All right. I see we've got some stuff in the stream, too. We'll be sure to tackle those things if we can. Folks, I am planning to run a test and DECA cycle based on your knowledge. what is a common cycle for test in DECA? Generally, I run only test at 700 milligrams per cycle. Results are very slow, and I want to pace the results up a bit. Also, I'm thinking of adding DECA that it may change my physique in a better way rather than test only, unless I'm mistaken. Your long-term viewer, thank you for the education.
I would, for initial, go 300 test, 400 DECA. That's my personal choice. Other people will probably say no, swap it the other way around. You're going to need some prolactin management, most likely. P5P might be enough. Start that 2 weeks before, 500 milligrams a day. And you're going to need some estrogen management. So depending, I would say whatever you ran on test only, you're probably going to need about 2/3 of that.
What did you say the ratio was on that test in DECA again at the beginning?
300, 400 test to DECA.
400 DECA, 300 test.
Okay. I like lower test, higher DECA. I've gone to quite big variations, but not everybody. I mean, there are people that struggle with DECA from a mental health point of view. Some people find it quite depressive. So not everybody can tolerate it. I do find DECA, as it gets higher, that depressive factor seems to go. But it is a suck it and see situation, and it's just whether you're willing to play with your emotions to that extent to see as at a higher dose you get less of a negative impact. But other than that, I would, I prefer that personally. I think it's less physically impacting from the point of view of things like blood pressure and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, DECA does have some unique traits, the mental health side being one of them, prolactin being another one, heart impact being another one, but I wouldn't be super concerned at that level of exposure.
That reminds me, Dave, last week we talked about 1,000 test versus a combined 1,000 milligrams from test and EQ. One thing we didn't mention, but a number of people mentioned in the comments, was I can't use EQ because I get anxiety from it. So there are going to be those people, right, that like EQ is not going to be an option because of the anxiety. I've never had that, man, and I used to be more prone to anxiety. I don't know why, but you would think someone who's prone would be more likely to get it. But I guess I was lucky in that result. Never got appetite increase from it either, though.
I've never actually looked at EQ from a point of view of why it would drive anxiety.
From what I understand, it has to do with the GABA receptor.
Okay, well, now all anabolics do this to an extent. So this is the other thing as well. So anabolics increase neuron activity.
Okay.
And the lower GABA response. This is across the board. The drugs that are particularly vicious at this, the main one being tren. Tren absolutely obliterates GABA and massively increases neuron activity. So that's the mechanism for anxiety behind all anabolics. I wonder why EQ is specifically a little bit more pronounced than others.
Yeah. Yeah, I looked out for it, but it never came. Rapid fire this one for us, Dave. Can you get Primo prescribed in the UK by the NHS or TRT clinic?
Can you fuck?
All right. So once again, back to that last week question, test at 1,000 or combined 1,000 from test and EQ. Hey guys, title question, but for a cut instead of a bulk, which would you prefer?
I would go low test, higher DHT, depending on tolerance in the sense of lipids, i.e. how tight your diet is, how suppressive Primo is for your lipids.
There's no Primo in the cycle. There's no Primo option here, Dave. There's test.
I thought we were looking at new compounds.
If there's test at 1,000 or there's test in EQ at a combined 1,000.
I apologize. Then if it's those two options, test EQ.
Yeah, me too. I go the same way.
I thought we were doing two compounds, but for a cut, same scenario. As in, would you do 1,000 tests or would you do test and something else? Sorry.
I gotcha. I'd be with you, though. Either Primo or Masteron, one of those two, something like that.
Or even both.
Or maybe like 350 test, 350 mast, 300 tren. I don't know.
Why are you on the tren tip today? What's going on? Are you trying to make an excuse to use tren again?
No. My tren days, I'm not going to say they're over, but it's
this show is sponsored by Tren.
Yeah. Use our code. Think. Great episode, and thank you. I have what I consider a very important topic, and that is, how does each anabolic outside of test affect estrogen when one is running a test base? From this episode, it seems that Primo lowers it, EQ might lower it, Deca will raise it slightly, I guess. So what about Mast and Tren and all of the orals? Okay. I don't think we have time to go through all of this.
No, but we could do it fairly quickly. Oral impact is quite low, though the DHTs do have a mild anti-estrogen effect. It's that minimal, you're not going to see any real pronounced effect. Proviron is an anti-estrogen, but it is a very mild one. And you really, from an oral point of view, you're going to be looking at actual AIs. Primo is anti-estrogenic. Masteron is more SERM-like, so it will block receptors rather than lower levels. Deca converts to estrogen at a rate of 20% of that at test. Tren does not convert to estrogen. However, Tren does increase ER receptor sensitivity, so it can make you more sensitive to estrogen at existing levels. It also increases the number of ERs in the breast, which is one of the reasons why it has this mechanism towards gyno. EQ can be anti-estrogenic. In lab-based, EQ has a very, very, very low-level conversion to estrogen, but this does not appear to be replicated in humans.
Yeah.
And it can be anti-estrogen in some, but it is definitely not across the board.
Yep, for sure.
What else have we got? I think that's everything oral.
You mentioned orals, but then there are other orals like D-ball that are going to be extremely high converters, right?
So D-ball is a very high converter and synthetic estrogen, so it's much more impacting PMO for PMO. Oxy does not convert. It does act as a progestin. So it will engage with the PR, but it doesn't actually convert with the ER. Novadex, actually, for a little bit of a side note, has a slight PR blocking capability.
Does it really? I didn't know that.
Yes. Yeah. Not massive, not significant enough to be classed as an anti-progesterone receptor med, but it does have a little bit of PR blocking. Anavar doesn't convert. T-ball doesn't convert. Winstrol doesn't convert, and Winstrol is anti-progestinic as well, and anti-estrogenic. I think that's about it, isn't it?
That's a good cover. Hey, Peyton, if you're still watching, that would make for a great reel right there. Right there. That was a beautiful little setup for a reel. I'm with you, by the way. We had so much talk about DHTs across the board being, AI-like. I'm so far with you on the Masteron because I've used it extensively now with a number of people that I work with, and the number of times that I've seen it actually lowering estrogen, even at a 1-to-1 ratio, is it's not as great as Primo by any means, by any stretch of the imagination. Peyton is with us. All right, thanks, buddy. In your guys' anecdotal experience, do you find or see any evidence of T-ball being suppressive? I know where this is coming from. If someone, an injured athlete, was on T-ball, what additional concerns would you have? Cheers, guys. Great show as usual. I believe, Dave, we talked about using a very low dose of oral once a day not being as suppressive as going on a long-term injectable testosterone.
Okay, yeah, dosage duration is dependent, but at the end of the day, even with an oral, continuous exposure is most likely going to create suppression irrespective of dose, unless you were super, super low.
Okay, yeah. I'd go with that. What other additional concerns would you have? Of course, it's an oral, so there's liver, cholesterol be another consideration. Messes up your cholesterol, drops your HDL.
If you're considering running T-ball as a long-term medication and you think it's not going to impact your natural test levels, you are misguided. It will, unless you run it at such a low dose that there's no point running it at all.
Yeah. I don't know what it does for collagen synthesis. I would think that Anavar would be an option in that case, just because I've seen there is research about Anavar and upregulating collagen production, soft tissue production. If you're in the market for protein powder, check out TrueNutrition.com. They literally have like every protein powder under the sun. I go with their cold filtered whey isolate or their Team Skip blend. I prefer the chocolate peanut butter cup, but there's a few flavors that I like. Let me know if you have any questions about that. Victoria, my wife, she gets the pea protein isolate. It's rare to find a pea isolate. Most of them are concentrate, so the isolate is super low in carbs. Regardless of your diet, they will have a protein powder for you, and you get to flavor it how you want and buy it by how many pounds you want. So check them out, TrueNutrition.com. They're the first company that ever supported our podcasting, so we support them. You can support us by shopping with True Nutrition and using our code THINK. Hey Scott, can you talk about the differences between HGH daily versus every other day at the same weekly dose? Thank you.
Yes, you.
I think he meant us. Would I bring that up in conversation? I think that so you're one of the first people, you and one other guy had talked, that I had heard talk about the every other day protocol. And every other day growth was, I would consider it to be quite popular a good decade ago, something like that. You're an every other day guy though, aren't you?
I am. Well, it's more I'm an insulin sensitivity management person.
Okay.
And growth has a habit of screwing that up. Now, more modern times, people's attitude to that is just use metformin.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I mean, you can definitely go that route. I personally find not a huge difference so say you were going to do 3 IU daily. I find that 4 IU every other day would have a very similar net yield over the exposure, but with less insulin resistance development. But obviously you can counter the insulin development by running metformin, which is fine, but a lot of people struggle with stomach issues around metformin. It does lower BG, which is not great for performance. Does it have a huge impact in the real world? Probably not. It's probably more significant on paper than it is in actual real life. I've never actually looked at it in any detail. There's the cost perspective. Now, I know growth is a lot cheaper than it used to be and a lot more affordable for most people. Yeah. I've never done a sort of comparison or had taken any real notice with the EOD protocols against CD protocol as whether there was a significant improvement in condition over a period of time or not. Maybe you have. You've definitely, because at the end of the day, I don't do a huge amount of prep work, so I'm generally looking at GH as a recovery agent rather than anything else. I don't tend to look at it in a way of condition for any factors. So maybe you're better to answer that side of things.
I usually only see blood sugar issues with people who are taking higher doses. And usually I counter that with insulin instead of using metformin. I mean, I might use some berberine, maybe we'll use some berberine at the end of the night, something like that. But generally, if we're having blood sugar regulation issues, I'm more likely to go with insulin. And I know that a lot of people are using long-acting Lantus nowadays, but I prefer to surgically get that insulin in where we need it. And I generally have gone with Humalog, small microdose throughout the day type thing.
I don't like Lantus at all. It doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't. I see people having really good response with it, and I have used it. But it's just not the route I've chosen to go.
What I don't like about it is you have this elevated level of insulation circulating within your body. So you're constantly driving BG down. Which if you miss a meal or you have any unexpected extra energy expenditure, you run this risk of pushing towards a mild. You're not going to risk your health, well, maybe if you're driving a race car or something, but you run this risk to some exposure to mild hypos. Now, for me, my use of insulin is to increase nutritional transit, to increase that drive into the cell from the nutrition that I'm eating with per meal. So I want my insulin timed around my meal. And I think you can get a higher peak with less long-term downturn using fast-acting than you will using long-acting. That's my personal opinion. Yeah. I mean, some people like a low dose long and then fast layered over the top. But, I mean, the problem is, you see, my personal experiments are always done with stupidly high doses, so I can't really use them as anything in relation to the average person.
Yeah. So with Lantus, they usually keep it pretty low. If you've got whatever it is, like a 10, 12 hour half-life, and you're using 10 units, that's like a unit per hour. You know what I mean? So you could effectively take 10 units of Lantus, and I'm not giving any instructions or suggesting anybody does this, and go to bed and still be fine, like before bed, and still be okay. Like, it's because it's such a slow release. But yeah, even like a Humulin R, you could take 2 shots of Humulin R and basically cover your entire day with it.
I don't think people realize that with like Nova Rapid and stuff, the peak is 60 to 90 minutes, but it's still in your system 8 hours later.
Yeah. I mean, granted, depending on how much you take, if you're only taking 2 units, it's not going to matter, But
no, but if you're taking 2 to 3 units with every meal, you are going to have an accumulation effect by the end of the day.
Yeah. I generally go with an everyday protocol on growth. I've just what I've gone with. And in contest prep, I like that. There is going to be that fat burning window while the growth is in your system. So I've used growth like pre-fasted cardio, stuff like that. But I think that at the end of the day, Skip and I just recently were asked, like, what's the best timing for your growth? And at the end of the day, you just take it. If you take, I don't see a huge difference between, 2 units every day versus 4 units every other day. At the end of the day, IGF is going to basically be the same, right? Because that's going to be a long-term build. Mm-hmm. What about this one in the live stream from Martin? He says, hey guys, is it a good idea to go on TRT for at least 2 months after a long DECA only cycle and then start PCT? I've heard about its metabolites keeping you suppressed for a long time. And I wonder if he heard that from me, my own experience from those metabolites kicking around. And back when I did PCT, I found it very difficult to recover from DECA. And personally, anybody that I work with, I try to shy away from DECA if they do PCT and recover their natural test after, just because I found it to be such a bear to recover from.
No, I haven't seen any significant difference. Metabolites detection of DECA is ridiculously long post-usage. I'm not... This is going to be in complete contradiction to what you've just said, by the way. Just to,
I'm ready for it. We've talked about it before.
I don't think the active metabolite is more suppressive for a longer period of time than anything else with a 14-day half-life. But I do think that the initial suppression is greater because of how well DECA binds, etc., etc. I definitely... The thing is, running a TRT for 2 months, then starting a PCT, is going to lengthen your overall suppression time.
Yeah,
I would argue that that's going to be as damaging to recovery as DECA is in its own right anyway. So I wouldn't say that's a solution in any way, shape, or form at all.
Yeah, personally. I was thinking the same thing, man. That one of the big factors is you're still shut down, for 8 more weeks, and duration is a big factor on guys that have to come off and recover.
Yeah. I agree.
Right.
The other thing is you can always obviously run HCG throughout your cycle if you're going to consider using DECA to try and minimize the Leydig day shutdown that you're going to get, or minimize the atrophy of the Leydig cells that you're going to get, which is going to help you when it comes to a recovery point of view.
All right, let's see what else we can get through here. If I've been training and experimenting with PEDs for 20 years plus, but I have never taken a specific compound before that differs from the compounds you have used, are you more likely to gain any more benefits than someone who has used the same compound multiple times? Okay, so he's just saying, like, could he benefit from introducing a new compound just from the fact that it's different?
Potentially, because it's a slightly different mechanism, it's a slightly different stress factor on the body, and we all have those compounds we get along with.
True.
And that is very, very much an individual thing. And there may be a compound that you haven't used that you just get along with. I mean, I used to get along with DECA incredibly well. You know, even at high doses, never had issues with mental health or anything from that nature. Scott, on the other hand, doesn't like the shit. You know, and same with the reverse with EQ. Scott likes EQ. I don't. Personally, I don't. I found it a bag of crap, personally. But, you know, I recognize that other people get very good results off it. So there is a variance between individuals. So, yeah, you might find another compound works really well for you and you've not used it before. It's unfortunate that though we can learn the in vitro effects of these compounds, like what they do, what we can't do is learn our unique response to these compounds without trying them.
Yeah.
So, which is why we always advocate this single compound to start with, learn how you respond to that, know what that compound does to you before you introduce another. Then that way you know what effects the second compound is having because you can rule out the effects that the first compound is having. And then you can start, you know, swapping that compound for another one and another one and another one until you've gone through the repertoire and you then make a decision on what worked for you.
Yep. I'm with you. Maybe he's going to discover like, hey, like for me, EQ was fantastic. He's never used EQ before. You know, and it's not about just trying different things, but you kind of hit on this is it's finding the thing that works for you. And when you find that, like lean into the things that work well for you, regardless of, you know, what everybody else is saying online. Speaking of which, I don't know if we're friends anymore if you like DECA and I like EQ.
Yeah, it's the same with the Primo trend, isn't it? You know, you don't have to use Primo because everybody else is currently hammering it like there's no tomorrow. If you find, I found Test and DECA worked for me, so I used Test and DECA, and I didn't really use much else for the bulk of it. It was Test and DECA.
Hey, on that note of Primo, best way to run Test, Primo, and Mast, what's the ratio? And then I asked him, I was like, well, what have you generally run for your cycles? Give me an example of a previous cycle. And he said last cycle was 400 Test, 400 Primo, and he's now doing TRT between.
You've got to be careful of total estrogen suppression. From what I've seen with Mast, so most our SERMs, Novadex and Clomid, they're selective estrogen receptor modulators, which means they affect certain receptors. Mast seems to be much broad spectrum in that it affects a lot of the estrogen receptors within the body, not just those based around the nipple, brain, and such like, which is where Novadex and Clomid come in. So your first concern is that you don't over negate your estrogen levels to a point where then they're going to have no impact on you. So I would possibly look at a ballpark that you want to be sort of total DHT equal to total test or there or thereabouts, but there will be some individuality in that. And the only way you're going to really know is by testing your levels. But bear in mind, when you test your levels, in general, Masteron will not have any impact on estrogen levels, but it will be blocking the receptors.
Okay.
So there has to be an element of how you feel and what your bloods are saying when it comes to using Mast as AI.
All right. What else do we have here? I've got a couple more. We're going to get through everything, it looks like, today. And by the way, once again, guys, if you want to take part in the next show, then definitely comment on YouTube, plus comments, likes, all that stuff. It helps boost our show in the algorithm. And if you're new here, we'd encourage you to subscribe and hit the bell. We have several shows that come out each week. If you don't hit the bell, then you won't know when we come out. And believe me, YouTube doesn't like really promoting content like this. I don't know why. Hey, guys, currently on my second cycle, 400 test, 20 VAR pre-workout. What's the expected strength boost? I'm 6 weeks in and I haven't noticed much of a change at all. Maybe a few more reps per lift, but nothing significant. Just figured I would be feeling more at this point. Bloods came back and my test is at 2100 nanograms. So the test is at least legit. You weren't listening, were you? Come on.
Might be.
Be honest, Dave.
So, sorry, I had to answer something.
I saw you looked away. I thought maybe you were... okay,
No,
400
sorry.
tested, 20 VAR. He's not experiencing any strength boost from this. I feel like even the 20 VAR is pretty modest. I know people have talked in the recent time. Vigorous Steve was like, you only need 1 milligram of Anavar. If it's legit, it's all you... I'm exaggerating. He didn't say 1 milligram. But...
Yeah, I mean, the first thing would be, is your gear legit?
Yeah, I mean, his test is coming back at 2100 nanograms on 400 test SIP at 6 weeks.
That sounds legit, then. Yeah, that sounds legit.
Yeah.
Is it a training issue?
Is it a nutrition issue or hydration issue?
Yeah, hydration has a huge impact on strength, definitely. Is it any of those? Yeah, is food? Have you increased any food? Are you gaining weight at all?
Yeah.
If you're not gaining any weight, then the chances are your calories are too low. Because you'd see some weight gain, even if it was bad weight. You'd see some weight gain if you were in a calorie excess, and you're going to need a bit of a calorie excess to improve strength as well as size. It's not 100% necessary, but it will help.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Yeah, I wonder, even though, listen, if you're doing a crap diet, I met a guy one time, Dave.
Is that a specific style of dieting? Is that a bit like keto or the
crap diet,
the keto diet, the carnivore diet?
Dude, I met this guy years ago when I worked for 7-Up and I was competing. So I was like walking around looking all jacked and stuff, right? And this guy worked for a competitive soda company. We meet in the back room. I'd never seen him before. Dude had to be 6 foot at like $150. Like we're talking like faces of blank lean, like super lean, like he's on some sort of, recreational pixie dust. And he's like, hey, he yells at me from across the room. The receivers in the back room, the guy who works for the company, for the grocery store. He's like, hey, I know you take steroids. What steroids do you take? I was like, what? And he was like, listen, I got some test SIP and some Sustanon 250. How do I stack those together? And I was like, what? And he was like, and I was like, well, what's your diet like? And he was like a cheeseburger. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, usually I'll have a cheeseburger in the middle of the day. I was like, what else? And he was like, that's it. If that guy were to take, and he said, let's say this guy's training every day. That's his diet. He takes 400 test and 20 Anavar per day. Even with that diet, he would have to get stronger if he's training every day from where he would notice a difference. You know what I'm saying? So even with a crap diet, yeah, I would see something. I mean, he's not strong to begin with, but yeah, I don't know.
It's the other thing is, if levels are elevated, you should be seeing an improvement unless your strength development is already at a point that would exceed that sort of dosing. So, if that is, if you ran cycles of a gram and you got really strong on cycles of a gram, then you did a cycle of 400, there is a possibility you're not going to see any strength gain.
I think he said it was like his second second cycle.
Yeah. So there is that element to it. But the other thing is, I would lean towards that maybe the training just isn't doing it for him.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder how many days he's trained. But even if he was like super overtrained 7 days a week, and I don't know. But there's something in there that's not the gear.
Yeah, I'm going the opposite way. Like, is he just not putting enough into it? Because I think some people think you take drugs, you get stronger. You don't need to push the drugs by pushing the training.
Yeah. Yeah. So the gear just helps you do everything else better. If you have a great plan, it's going to help elevate that.
A very simple example. If you're doing, let's say you're doing 200-pound bench press for 8 reps and you're doing 4 sets of 8, and that's what you're doing, and you go on gear and you continue to do 200-pound on bench press for 4 sets of 8 reps, there's not going to be much incentive for your body to grow. You're not stimulating much for it to grow. You might get a bit of size, but you're not doing anything really on the strength. You need to be trying to move more load or increase the reps in order to stimulate that increase in power. That was where I was going with it.
I see. All right. Dave, I know that you've got other things to do. You're a really busy man. Do you have any Uncle Dave's wisdom for us here in our first episode recording in the new year, 2025? Do you hear that sound he made, guys? That was the sound of, I didn't think of anything this week. I never think of anything. And usually if Scott looks at me, I can just make something up off the top of my head. And nothing's coming to me.
I have been reading about things, but then my brain's just gone blank for some reason.
The Deca.
But I have, no, it's not the Deca. I haven't taken Deca in fucking 8 years, 9 years.
I know, but you told me it affects your memory.
I do. I genuinely, there's some science that says it does, and I genuinely believe it has affected mine, yes.
Take creatine.
I do.
You should take, you probably can't. Never mind.
No, it screws with me, kidney markers.
Yeah, never mind.
I'm trying to think of what I was...
Last week you taught us about, I can't remember the name of that, Eastern philosophy. Eastern style logotherapy.
We talked about logotherapy last week.
That was great.
So little one, not much, but what a good weapon's probably the wrong word. Good method against depression, low mood, is to be productive.
Yeah.
Now, very often we will look at being productive. This is what I've been reading about, and I couldn't for some reason put my head around it. Sometimes we overface ourselves with trying to be too productive, or trying to pick a productivity that is too challenging. So there needs to be a balance. When you're feeling good and you're feeling positive, challenge yourself. Definitely challenge yourself. Definitely push your boundaries. It wants to be a little bit out of your capability, but what it doesn't want to be is too pie in the sky. So if in the same with training, if you're bench, we'll go back to 200 pound. If you're benching 200 pound, try 210. Don't try 300. And it's the same with when you're trying to be productive. So you pick something when you're feeling positive and you're in a good place. You pick something that's going to challenge your abilities.
Yeah.
When you're not feeling positive, you pick things that are within your capabilities but give you a sense of accomplishment.
Okay.
So
small wins.
So if you're quite depressed, the first thing is get the fuck out of bed. Get up, have a shower, force yourself to have some personal hygiene, make the bed. Even if you don't normally do it, make the bed, because I've accomplished something. I see a result for my effort. I see positivity. I see something that's positive. I've done something and I've achieved a result. I've made the bed and I can visually see that. And that's what helps really well with in low mood situations, is that you do things that you can see a result.
Yeah.
Rather than things that may be theoretical or mental. We've had quite a heavy snowfall. We're talking about it in the day. Now, Sunday we did about 2-3 hours of digging out, and the same again Monday. there's an immediate sense of accomplishment because I can visually see the effect. I mean, it was hard graft, and I'm definitely not fit enough to be doing that shit, and I'm damn too old to be doing that shit. But
maybe a little. We can do a little.
There was a large sense of accomplishment because I could physically see the snow had been cleared, and there was an area that was now clear as snow. And that's the key. When you're trying to build up positivity around you, you need to do things that have a visual completion, not something that's academic. So, like, if you were working on a project, writing about it or planning it, though it's not a bad thing, there's not really a visual representation of that.
Yeah.
Where if you can do something that gives you a visual representation, it gives you a visual reward, and that will be much more positive in improving your mood, and your self-worth. The other thing is do things for other people.
Yeah.
Because you then get a verbal reward from the other person. You get a thank you. You get enough affirmation that you are worth something. You get an affirmation that you are a good person, that you're being positive, that you're being productive, that you are worthy. And a lot of depression is based around not feeling good enough about yourself and not feeling you're worth anything. So by doing things and being productive for other people, and you get that. But there is a caveat to this, and it's a two-edged sword, because you can't give to other people unless you are in a position where you feel capable of giving. Yeah. So if you're going to do things to benefit your mental well-being for other people, make sure they're small little things that aren't going to be too taxing on you, because you've only got small reserves at this point and you don't want to be wasting them to willingly giving them to everybody else. So there's a balance to be had there. But that's where we are this week.
I like that one. That's good. Especially going into the darkest, we're like basically the darkest point of the year. Although every day is getting slightly longer now, I believe. We're past the darkest point. So, this is a time where we definitely need to think about mental health. And I'll add one thing to that note is go outside. That the sun literally penetrates your skull and interacts with the chemicals in your brain, stirs up your neurotransmitters, excites your mitochondria. Everybody's talking about mitochondria right now. Go outside. The sun will help to elevate that. I have this light. Let's see if I can turn this on right there. Oh, it's going to be bright as hell. I got a red light. I use this light every day, Dave. So on that note, I'm going to go use my red light. You can get on with the rest of the stuff you're doing. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Check out TreeNutrition.com. Use our code THINK. supplementsource.ca for Canadians, and of course Strom Sports Nutrition. That's stromsports.com. They support us, we support them, and of course evalbloodanalysis.com. All of our stuff is down below in the description. You can click on any of those links and check them out. You can register to get some blood work done with Dave today, guys. And of course, thank you to everybody from Patreon. We'll be taking a bunch of Patreon questions for the next episode, so load us up over there. And hey, thanks to everybody in the live stream. Dave, thank you.
Cake helps my mitochondria.
For another episode of the podcast, we'll see you soon. Thanks, guys.